Welcome to the Seizure Turnaround, where we explore the topic of functional seizures through conversations with people who provide an unfiltered record of their experience. In today's powerful episode, we sit down with Natasha, a parent of a child with functional seizures. Natasha opens up about the challenges, breakthroughs, and essential lessons she learned along the way, offering a beacon of hope and practical advice for other parents whose children are on the recovery path. Welcome to the Seizure Turnaround, Natasha.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm delighted to have been asked.
So, could you start by telling us a little bit about Oscar's initial symptoms and what it was like when he first started experiencing seizures?
Yes, it happened when he turned 10. He had a playground accident whereby a mate jumped off some play equipment and landed one knee into the side of his head, one knee into the back of his head, which caused concussion. And then post-concussion, he started to have these seizures and he would start to lose his memory, and then we'd find him laying down on the ground, seizing. One time we were in a supermarket and he fell into shelves and started seizing. So it was very scary, and we were told initially that that was a part of post-concussion syndrome. But after several years, they disappeared and then they came back and they started to become a more significant problem.
How long did it take you to actually get a definitive diagnosis?
It took years, especially because they didn't know if it was part of post-concussion syndrome. And it wasn't actually until he had quite a significant seizure at high school and he needed to go to hospital by ambulance. And while we were waiting to be seen in triage in the hospital, it was actually an AMBO that said, I think this might be a functional seizure. That was what the doctor ended up saying. This is not epilepsy, but we do want to go through with all the testing to make sure it's not. And so they sort of partially diagnosed it, but they told us to go back to his neurologist. And it really wasn't until we'd seen him quite a few times over the course of a couple of years, he stopped and he just said, I don't think this is my area of expertise, but I do know someone who is exceptional in this area. And I'd like to refer you to them because I think this is a functional seizure.
So, when that neurologist eventually gave you the definitive diagnosis and said these are non-epileptic, did you have any initial skepticism? How did that feel for you?
Initially, I couldn't get my head around it because it just presented so much like epilepsy. But I think the turning point was the testing process that we went through to rule it out. So they put them in a chair and do all this stimulation in a room, and I couldn't do anything. I could just see him. They caused the seizure to come on. So they could see the brain activity. They came back and said, no, it's not epilepsy. So I think it was very hard to comprehend it. But the more I read, the more I understood, okay, this is okay. And I think also getting to that point of acceptance as quickly as possible, that it wasn't epilepsy and that it was something completely different and it was treatable, gave me a bit of hope.
Mm. And did Oscar accept the diagnosis? Were there any differences between how you both accepted it?
I think his goal was just to stop them, and that was really what it was. And I think learning more about his triggers, that really made a difference. So there were lots of stages where we were just trying to understand it, and once it had a name, and I know some people are funny about labels, but I think when you do have a name and you have a reason, it helps the acceptance and it helps you move quickly into the path of where to get help as soon as possible.
Mm. So that was quite a long time ago from the onset of symptoms to the diagnosis. How did you manage the emotional toll on your family while that was going on, especially because you have another child as well?
It was very difficult to manage our feelings about what was going on. Oscar would have multiple seizures a day. It was very scary. Lou was 6 when the seizures started, and we tried to shield Lou as much as possible, especially on car rides. Oscar would have seizures in the car. So we had headphones and a device so that Lou could listen to music and turn away so she didn't see Oscar having a seizure. Lou has become now such an invaluable part of the care team. So it has gone from horribly scary to being able to manage it because we understand it a lot more.
Mm. And I understand that at his lowest point, he wasn't attending school and he wasn't going out at all, and he would wear dark sunglasses and beanies and he'd basically shut himself off from the world.
Yeah, that was the pits, the absolute pits. And I would never wish that on anybody. We couldn't stop the seizures. He was wearing dark clothes. He was not going to school, wore glasses the whole time. Everything had to be dark. Everything had to be quiet. And Oscar just withdrew completely from everybody. That was really a very, very dark time. And that was really the beginning of Oscar's recovery. He hit rock bottom, absolutely hit rock bottom. And at that point, Oscar was seeing a psychologist, but the psychologist, incredibly helpful bloke, unbelievably helpful bloke, just said, Natasha, this is beyond me. We need a neuropsychologist in here. And it took a couple of finds, mainly because Oscar's situation is so complex and dynamic and unusual. And so we finally found the right one. And everybody helped along the way. But really, what helped was understanding what had happened and the therapy that went with the neuropsychologist that Oscar's with now is going back and facing fears, talking about the worst bits and understanding it, accepting it, and coming to terms with what it was.
Mm-hmm. And I'm interested in the emotion involved in being a parent, and particularly a parent of a child with functional seizures. I just imagine it must be really horrible, actually, watching them have one of these things, especially initially when you don't know what they are. And then to know that the more fearful and anxious that a parent is about the seizures, the more the child picks up on that, which can then cause more episodes. And because parents are trying so hard and love their child so much, some parents actually become really overprotective. You know, they don't even let their child alone for even a second. Like someone's with them 24/7, even when they're sleeping and showering. And whilst that's coming from a place of goodness, it can actually cause resentment and further anxiety and even worsen family dynamics. So, Natasha, what are your thoughts around all of that? And how did you navigate this and allow Oscar to be alone so that he could learn how to manage his own symptoms and have a sense of agency?
We did a lot of talking and a lot of planning. And I will admit there were some parts, especially initially, when we didn't know what it was and we didn't have any plans and they randomly happened and they happened multiple times a day. Those were periods of time where we couldn't leave him because you just didn't know when it was going to happen and how many there were going to be. I think as Oscar got better and we understood the triggers a bit better, that made a big difference. I have to say, and this may not be a popular thing to say, but reducing screen time, that also made a massive, massive difference. And it was talking about the outcomes. So our goal is to be seizure free. That's the goal. And these are the things that we need to do. So you need to have minimum of 8 to 10 hours sleep. Minimize your screen time. So get off your phone, get off gaming. They don't help. And it did help because Oscar has grown up with this. And so he's been able to see the difference. Okay, when I do game, I'm worse. When I don't have sleep, I'm worse. And it's sort of like cause and effect. He did go through a phase where he didn't tell me that he was either having a seizure or going to have a seizure or had a seizure. He wouldn't tell anyone because he didn't want to miss out on life, which then ended up sometimes having really bad outcomes. So it's trial and error. And also Oscar went through a phase of, I'm not telling mum if I feel like a seizure's coming on because she won't let me go to this party. So we come up with compromises. So we'll say, okay, I know you really want to go to this party, but how about you sleep before the party? How about instead of it being 5 hours, you go for 3 hours? Or instead of sleeping over, you don't sleep over, you just stay. And then I'll bring you back for breakfast the next morning so you're still part of the party. So compromises and discussions about what can be possible.
Yeah, because as you're saying, having these things as a teenager really disrupts their typical milestones or can do. Things like going to sleepovers, learning to drive, and those things can be really sad for them.
Yeah.
It must be difficult to find that balance, like you're saying, to sort of encourage him to maintain some sense of normalcy and continue to do things that bring him joy.
Bringing joy. That is a beautiful thing. Driving, actually, you've touched on something that is one of Oscar's greatest upsets is At the moment, he's still outside the timing that you're allowed to have between seizures. So every time he gets close, he ends up having a seizure. And the last seizure he had, he did weep because he was just so upset. But he's not maudlin about it. It's a momentary thing. It's just like, you've got to be kidding me. But then he has this fierce determination, right? I'm going to get back up on the horse. And he's fairly sensible as a kid too. So he doesn't want to get behind the wheel if he thinks he's going to have a seizure. And he recognizes that having a car is a privilege and driving is a privilege. I know that it's 3 months, but he's aiming for 6 so that it is really almost in remission. That's his goal. But he's also, he's very lucky. He's got some very kind mates who pick him up or drop him off. He calls himself a hobbit because he's very adept at public transport, and it's nothing for him to get on the train into the city and then out to a country town where some of his mates live and go there for a weekend. It doesn't stop him.
Yeah, that's great. And what about any specific strategies or interventions that ultimately led him onto the path of recovery?
So once we found the right neuropsychologist, that has made a profound impact, in fact, a life-changing impact to Oscar and a life-changing impact to us as a family. So just things like understanding sleep and the importance of sleep with functional seizures. There's not just the exhaustion from the seizure itself, there's additional exhaustion from sensory overload with the autism overlay dynamic. So sleep is imperative. Ice packs on the vagus nerve, that has been a massive game changer. Our neuropsychologist recommended putting Oscar's bed, like getting a massive mattress and just putting that on the floor. And that has been a game changer as well. So it is a much safer environment for him to have that. Oscar's in year 12 and discovered Coke and coffee this year as a stimulant for keeping you awake. But what he also realised is that that has been a disaster for his brain with the seizures. So that's been a really big learning curve for us as well.
Natasha, you mentioned the ice. Could you just explain exactly what you do with that for parents who may never have heard about it?
Yeah, so ice on the vagus nerve, which is on the side of the neck, can stop or slow down the progression of a seizure. So we have both the ones that you just keep in the freezer regularly, but we also have disposable ones in the car. If you can get the ice onto the side of your child's neck really quickly, it does stop the progression of the seizure, and that's been a massive game changer. Previously, school was a little bit reticent about taking Oscar on any kind of excursion, but now with the ice pack and proven ability of the positive impact of the ice pack, that's been a fundamental change of their attitude and their approach to including Oscar. It's great.
And talking about school, a lot of parents will be really interested to know how you interfaced with Oscar's school. Teachers and other students often overreact to these episodes, which obviously really affect the kids with the seizures. And it's also sometimes really difficult to educate school staff about not calling an ambulance or how to put recovery strategies into place. Could you give us some advice around that?
I feel very privileged that the school that Oscar and Lou attend are incredibly centred around well-being and academia. And they have a philosophy that if a student has the right mental health strategies in place and their well-being is at the best level, they're going to excel in academia. And I believe in that philosophy wholeheartedly. So there's a well-being team, there's an amazing school nurse. The principal and the assistant principals, they're very, very supportive. And then you have a really great supportive network of teachers as well that want to make it successful. So, we have meetings at the start of every year about strategies to help Oscar with school. So he has a card that all he has to do is pull it out of his pencil case, and the teacher knows that he can feel a seizure coming on, and he goes straight to the school health centre. The nurse, I'm pretty sure she's going to put a plaque on there calling it Oscar's gurney because he has been there a lot. I've even had teachers call me that aren't Oscar's teachers, and I've had them call me saying, he's staggering. What would you like me to do? And so that's incredible. That that kindness, that support, that care is unbelievable. So I would really recommend getting your child into a school where they value well-being, because that's been our experience. I work really hard on good communication with teachers. So I have a document that I've created. It has a plan for autism, it has a plan for functional seizures, especially, and what to do. And I'd email that to his teachers at the start of the year. And so they are very clear of what needs to be done.
Mm. So it sounds like communication is key. And what about self-perception? Some kids can be really ostracized at school and stigmatized. So, other kids will call them weird or unusual, or they'll say you're just putting it on. Has Oscar ever faced any of that? And if so, how have you dealt with that as a family?
Kids do, especially with the seizures, they'll walk past Oscar and pretend they're having a seizure, or, oh, I've lost my memory. They're really like nasty. That was pretty bad in the first half of high school. There's some pretty awful things. But Oscar's quite a unique individual and he has embraced it. And so he'll say to someone, watch out, you might make me have a seizure and then I'll forget who you are, but I will remember who you are. And so he leans into it and he uses humour.
That's great. Yeah, humor can be an amazing adaptive coping strategy, can't it? So, Natasha, just back to the triggers. You alluded to things like sleep, and I'm just wondering whether you or Oscar have been able to identify specific triggers or stressors that contribute to the seizures, and how you worked as a family to address those.
Any kind of head injury is one of the triggers, lack of sleep, stress, and very unfortunately, our family has experienced a significant amount of trauma through divorce, separation, and domestic violence. And any kind of mention of my former husband, any kind of mention of the things that my former husband used to do to us as a family, that is a real trigger for him. So, yeah, there are quite a lot of triggers. And I think learning more about the triggers, that really made a difference.
Mm. And as I understand it, his first memory of what he terms his first episode, or one of his first episodes, was when he was with a friend and they were discussing surnames, and he told his friend what his old surname used to be. And, there's the head injuries, and of course, there's the autism. And I understand that he's had significant bullying in primary school as well. But then there's also this terrible trauma. So, how do you, in your mind, conceptualize what it is that contributes to these seizures?
That's such a great question, Lana. And I think the trauma of what happened to Lou, Oscar, and myself has had a significant impact on Oscar. There was so much change so quickly with no notice. And just to give context, we had to flee our family home. I had 15 minutes to flee our family home and grab my children from school and disappear. And we've been living in hiding for 6.5 years. And that has been, I mean, it's horrific for anybody, but it is a significant contributor. The stress of what happened, the stress of him being yanked out of his house, the stress of losing his family home. As you said, we had to change surnames to protect our identity. And that's a lot of change for anybody. But for someone who's on the spectrum, for someone who has stress as a trigger for seizures, that has been almost catastrophic. And the seizure that I referenced before, where the ambulance was needed at school, that was after a significant event that had happened with my former husband. And so, trauma definitely has a significant impact on the seizures. And Oscar loses his memory. And so, depending on the severity of the seizure, he can lose his entire memory. And I'm talking, he doesn't know who I am. And we have had situations where Oscar has not known any of us and not known even what a spoon or a fork or a plate or a door or a chair is. And He's had to completely relearn absolutely everything, and it does come back, but the memory of the traumatic event doesn't come to his conscious memory, but is in his subconscious, and it is still there, but his brain suppresses it because it is so traumatic.
Mm. And some parents think that talking to their children about the trauma or bullying or even the seizures themselves can make things worse. Like they steer away from that because they think it's going to make the child feel worse or feel bad or sad. And they sort of brush it off. Or they might reassure them saying, you know, you'll be fine, which doesn't help the child feel understood. And then at the other end of the spectrum, um, some parents tend to sort of repetitively question or press their child over and over again, which can be really overwhelming. And then the child can shut down. How have you navigated that? It just seems all really difficult.
I think I'm in the middle there because over time I've learned where the boundary is for Oscar. And there are some things that I'd never talk to Oscar about because I know it's just going to be a trigger. And I've learned that over time. And then sometimes he will talk about it. And so I just keep really quiet and I let him talk until he's finished talking about it. But he's very angry with what's happened to us. So it's almost like a topic that's out of bounds a lot of the time. And it's about respecting boundaries. And I think it's about setting boundaries too, about what you will talk about and what you won't. Sometimes we laugh about it. We've developed quite a dark humor on what's happened to us. And sometimes he'll make a throwaway line that is very, very funny, but out of context, it's very sad. But we do use a lot of humor to get through the trauma of it and to talk about it. And we also do I do a lot of driving in the car with my kids so that they have time and space to talk about things that are bothering them or that they want to get off their chest. You know, that also absolves them from the difficulty of looking at someone in the eye. They're looking straight ahead. We usually go for a scenic drive, so they're seeing beautiful countryside or they're seeing beautiful beaches. I do it a lot more with my daughter now, as Lou has idiopathic stage 3 cirrhosis. So Lou is very sick, and to get Lou out of the house, I do a Sunday drive.
Hmm. Hmm. And I just want to go back to something you said a moment ago. You said something really important about giving him the space to talk and you just to listen. And that's key, isn't it? Because the kids with functional seizures, they're working on expressing their emotion, but also the parent has to work on their ability to hear it, which is often really difficult.
Yes, hearing it is really awful, and I have had to learn to become very stoic. So it's been a massive learning curve just to stop and listen and not interject and wait for them to pause and then ask if you can. So I do a lot of, can I ask you a question? Or how many more questions can I ask? So it is about that communication. But my whole thing about my kids is I want them to have a safe space and be in a safe place. They're my really big key things for them. And I also want them to have quality of life. And in doing these things together and having that communication and the boundaries and being really honest, like really, really honest, has made a fundamental difference to his recovery.
Mm.
One of the things that we said together, especially after what happened to our family 6.5 years ago, is that this does not define us. So we say that with autism, we say that with our experience with domestic violence, we say that as a solo parent family, we say that as a kid recovering from functional seizures, this does not define him. And that's been a great mantra as well for him. And I think one of the fundamental things is that Oscar started to understand and believe that none of this is his fault. None of it is his fault. And to see that life can be better and that as awful as it was, what happened to us, we are free. And I think that that has helped Oscar also realize that whatever happens next, he can choose. He's free.
Mm. And Natasha, how have you ensured your own self-care and maintained your strength as a parent during all of this? I mean, it just all seems like such an enormous weight that you've been bearing.
I have to say I've eaten my feelings this year. But it hasn't been easy at all. And I haven't done enough self-care, if I'm going to be perfectly honest. I need to see my therapist a lot more. I try and this is not healthy, but I try and compartmentalize things because we do seem to attract, as a family, we seem to attract, you know, really terrible situations. And especially 3 years ago, we were just coming out of everything and everything was looking great. And we were about to take a few next steps of even more freedom and even more, making some big life choices as a family. And Lou got sick, really, really sick. We didn't know she was so sick. And that has had a profound impact on all three of us because up until very recently, we didn't know about Lou's longevity. And that's looking a bit better now, which is great. But I'm grateful. And that sounds very corny and it sounds very, I don't know, idealistic, but I'm grateful that we have a place to live. I'm grateful that I have my kids. I'm grateful that I've got a job and I've got a job that's flexible enough to look after my kids. And I definitely recommend finding a really good therapist. I've been very, very lucky. I have beautiful, beautiful friends, and they're all in different areas. So, school mums have been extraordinary in the way in which they've been supportive of our family. Close family friends have been amazing. So, it's finding a village. And that, again, that's such a cliche thing. But coping with all of this, you need a village, and you can't do it without a village.
Mm, that's wonderful advice. And on that, how can others be a support for parents like yourself who have a child with functional seizures?
Beautiful question to ask. That is such a beautiful question to ask. The hardest bit has been getting people to understand it. And there are some people in our close circle that still don't get it, and that's okay, but they try. And I think that's the main thing. I think also not being scared. So people who surround you, so the village people, give them reason not to be scared about what happens and that it is fixable, it is treatable, and you can stop it. And I think just inclusion and kindness. So people do really kind things, like they'll leave a bottle of wine on the doorstep or they'll pick Lou up and take Lou out for the day. They don't expect it, but people doing kind things, putting a meal in the freezer. One of my birthdays, my friends got together and gave me a box of vouchers. There was a couple of massages in there, but there were also vouchers for looking after Lou and Oscar. It was beautiful. So that just seeing the parents, seeing them and just saying, I'm here for you. Yeah. And coming over, that's one of the lovely things my village has done too. They come over to us. So it's like, no big deal. We can't go out. And the other thing is inclusion. So very, very often I have to cancel. And it'll be because Oscar's had a seizure. It'll be because I've got to take Lou to emergency department. And my village still rocks up. They'll still keep a space for me. They keep including us, even though very often we have to pull out. And that's really hard too, because that takes away the social aspect for me, because I need to see my friends. I need to have a coffee with my friends. I need to go to a 50th birthday party, even if it's for 2 hours. So inclusion, kindness, support, listening, that's what people can do to help parents.
Mm. Natasha, what about yourself in terms of how has the diagnosis of functional seizures impacted you on an emotional level, but also on a functional level?
Significantly, yeah. It's completely changed the way in which I work. So I start work at 5 so that I can get 2 hours of work done without interruption usually, and I work late at night. So I work very odd hours. And I do freelance work. So there's no way I could do a 9 to 5 job. Actually, maybe this is a bit personal, but the thought of starting a relationship, like another, that's so off the table. I don't know where I'd fit the person in, maybe between 1 and 4 a.m. or something like that. But that has had a toll. I don't have the headspace. Hats off to anybody who does. Like, I am in such admiration. If they have done that, I think that's incredible.
Mm. So, Natasha, some parents whose children develop these seizures, they feel really guilty or ashamed or they feel like it's their fault or it's something that they've done. And that's why the children have these seizures. I just wonder what kind of emotions you've been dealing with over this journey and what sort of things have come up for you. Have you ever blamed yourself for Oscar's seizures?
Yep. The guilt is so much guilt, so much guilt and shame and a lack of confidence, a lack of self-worth. I just felt like a really terrible human. Um, and and not why me, I'm not that sort of person, but the guilt has been horrific, absolutely horrific, especially coming to terms with the fact that the significant trigger is the person I married, the person I chose to be the father of my children, that I will go to my grave. The guilt and the shame of that I will go to my grave over, because I just made such a poor choice and lumbered these kids. And it has had a profound traumatic impact on my kids. So I spend a lot of time not trying to make up for it, but trying to make life better for them. So I'm relentless in my pursuit of finding what works to help my kids and support them. Because the shame, the guilt, and just the very poor decision I made.
But you couldn't have known then what was going to unfold. Like, you couldn't have known then what you know now. So it's not your fault.
Thank you. No, it's not my fault, and I feel embarrassed about getting emotional, but I think it's an important part of the story, and it's not just, you're right, my therapist has said that repeatedly too, this is not my fault. And one day I'll feel less guilt and one day I'll feel less shame. And as I get older and I forgive myself and we have successes, and then I see my kids thrive.
Yeah. You're an amazing parent and you're doing an absolutely stellar job. And I mean, it just sounds like his life has changed so much since the onset of these seizures when he was 10. And he appears to be really thriving. He has become school captain. He's got great mates. He's finished high school. He's extremely bright. He's going to be going off to university. And I understand that he's just been awarded Dux of one of his subjects.
Yep, he was stuck in a subject. And he's writing a book on autism for teenage boys. He's got this sense of confidence and this sense of self-belief, mainly because Oscar's come from starting school with 100 words in prep and not being able to articulate a sentence or anything like that. And now Oscar is finishing year 12, scored, school captain. So he's come a long way.
So reflecting on that, you must be very proud and know in your heart that you've done something really special to get him to that point.
Thank you so much. And I try.
Mm. Can I ask a question that I know a lot of parents ask? And that is, how do you manage expectations of your teenager when they're having seizures and they're like, Mom, I can't do the dishes, or I can't help because I feel like I'm going to have a seizure? I know that comes up a lot.
Oh, all the time. Yeah, actually, there's two parts I'd like to answer on the managing expectations. So I think because his face is it's so obvious when he's going to have a seizure. He's tried it once or twice and I've just looked at him and his face doesn't look like you're going to have a seizure. That's rubbish. Go and unpack the dishwasher. We'll have a little giggle and then he'll go off and do it. So I think I've got that advantage that I can see in his face if he's going to have a seizure or not. But I think the other thing of expectations is sometimes he thinks he can do more than what he can actually do. And that is a huge issue. And it's balancing out, you don't believe in me versus let's be pragmatic about this, mate. Let's be real. Okay, if you do this, this and this, let's look back when you have done this, this and this in the past and what's the outcome been. So we talk about consequences, we talk about outcomes, we talk about managing expectations and being honest about that sort of thing. So both of those things in terms of managing expectations. If I can see that he's really fatigued, so just going back to the getting out of jobs and getting out of whatever, I will give him space to sleep, I think, because that has a profound impact. And I'd much rather him go off and have a nap for a couple of hours and come back and do his washing or come back and unpack the dishwasher or come back and help me wash the car I'd much rather delay that. So I've become incredibly flexible. But the other thing, sorry, this is what's helped too. Structure. Structure has helped everything. So we use physical calendars, we use online calendars. We talk about this is what's going to happen today. These are the meals we're going to have this week. So try to minimize surprises and have a really solid structure for days and weeks and months.
Fabulous advice. Another one that comes up a lot is parents are often recommended not to pay too much attention to the episode itself, so it's not as long or as intense, and then to connect with their child and create a positive experience at other times outside of the episode. I can imagine as a parent that kind of just, leaving the episode to play out is much easier said than done when it's your child, especially at first. How did you work on your own reactions and responses?
Everything's calm. So I slow everything down. Single words, just bring the whole tone down. And I think that makes a significant difference. And the natural response is, oh my God, this kid's having a seizure. I've got to sort this out really quickly. That doesn't help. It doesn't help anybody. It upsets everybody around you. It upsets you. It upsets them. But if you just take the whole thing down. And someone said to me, you look as if you don't care, once they observed me. And I just said, yeah, I really care. But what I care more about is his anxiety about seeing me upset. And I'm trying not to be upset so he doesn't panic, because he panics if he thinks I'm upset. And, I just went later and got a glass of wine and sat in the pantry and cried. But that's the reality of it. But just slowing everything down, calming everything down.
That must be difficult to leave your child in the room and walk away. What does that actually feel like?
It's awful. And I will admit the first couple of times I just sat at his door in case it got worse. But you do need to give him that space.
Yeah, really important. So, Natasha, how do you think that Oscar's life has changed since he's been recovering from these seizures?
It's fundamentally changed. I think he understands himself a whole lot better than he ever would have. I think it's made him work out what he wants in life. I think it's made him work out what kind of person he wants to be and what kind of people he wants in his life. I think it's made him far more empathetic than you would expect your average 18-year-old to be. I think that it makes him look at the world differently. And I think once the reassurance that your memory does come back, that you're not going to die from this, that calms everything down. And also I think that he feels like he's got a second lease on life.
And what about your relationship with Oscar now compared to at the height of the seizures?
I think we're very in tune with each other. We've had to be. We've had to live in fight or flight mode for such a long time. Oscar and I are both on the same page about recovery, both on the same page about quality of life and getting better. And that makes a difference. Sometimes we're not on the same page. Sometimes he gets a bit excited and goes, oh, I might go to 3 parties this weekend. But it's all about communication and being honest.
Yeah. In hindsight, Natasha, is there anything that you would have done differently in your approach to his seizures or to the treatment?
I would have learned acceptance far quicker. I would have done more research at the beginning. I would have asked a lot more questions, a hell of a lot more questions. Well, as we learned with Oscar at the beginning, we were told he was deaf when he was 2 instead of autistic. And I did question that, but I didn't question it enough. I have become relentless in my determination to get Oscar better, but I could have done it earlier. And I think you feel a bit helpless at first. And I think that is just keep asking questions and don't stop asking questions. You're entitled to ask questions as a parent if something's not right. And the other thing is, your kid better than anybody else does. So believe in yourself. And if you don't think it's right, and that's not any denigration to any doctor at all. This is your kid. You know this kid. If they're not right, they're not right. So you need to, just back yourself in. That's what I didn't do enough of. That gives you a lot of self-confidence too.
And Natasha, what messages of hope or encouragement could you offer to families who feel really lost at the moment or who are still searching for the path to recovery?
It gets better. And it's not a death sentence. And it actually, as awful as it is, it has made our family life much richer. It has made it deeper, a deeper bonding, a deeper relationship, a deeper respect for each other. And you've got to learn to live with it and not use it as an excuse, but use it as a reason to find ways that you can go on and live and do things together. So it's not the end of the world. I had a kid who was nonverbal and now he is running with life. Oscar's situation is very unique. It's very dynamic. It's complex, but it does get better. It really, really gets better. And you do find joy and we laugh a lot. And I think the best thing to do is not look at other families. Like, don't look at another family. And I really mean this, that this is unique to our situation. So not everyone's going to be a solo parent family. Not everyone's going to have the ability to work from home and do freelance. So you've got to find what works for you and stick to your guns and believe in your kid too. Have belief in your family and belief in yourself. That's what I would recommend.
That's absolutely wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Natasha. There's just so much information that you've shared with us today, and we really, really appreciate your vulnerability and your honesty and your openness. The responses that you gave us today, I think, they've really gone beyond that of functional seizures, and I think that families with children who have other functional symptoms or chronic illnesses will really appreciate listening to what you have to say. So thank you so much.
That's my absolute pleasure. Thank you for asking me. And thank you for the great questions. They were so good.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Seizure Turnaround. We were joined by Natasha, a parent of a child with functional seizures. Next time on the Seizure Turnaround, we'll be exploring how to overcome functional seizures using sheer mental fortitude and grit. Until then, stay well.